So this presentation is going to serve as the instructions or the procedure for doing this groundwater lab number 1, and it is very important. Listen carefully. You must listen, watch, read this entire presentation before you begin any part of the lab, and that means all the way through to the very end. First of all, you're going to open up your notebook, you're going to make yourself a little data chart. Groundwater lab, obviously the date, be today's date. As you view this, you're going to write down the materials that you need in order to complete the lab. Very simple data chart, and you see a set of conclusions that we will do together. However, you have to write one conclusion based on what you observe. I will supplement that with what I wanted you to see, and sometimes it'll be the same, sometimes it won't. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go get a plastic cup and you're going to put gravel in it. You'll find the gravel on the countertop in the classroom. The amount of gravel that you put in there really isn't that important, but well, let's say it about 3/4 of the way, 75, 80% full of the cup with gravel. Then you're going to get one of these clear plastic tubes, and you're going to stick the plastic tube kind of down into the gravel. You've got to force it in there a little bit. You're not trying to shove it all the way to the bottom of the cup, just barely push it into the gravel so that it stands up. Then you're going to get a measuring cup. And we're going to put some water in that. Remember, this is a water activity. It's a water unit. Then you're going to pour the water into the tube, and you're going to pour it in there quickly. We want all of the water to go from the cup and be here in the tube, like right away. As soon as you start to pour, one of your lab partners is going to start a timer, and we're going to time how long does it take all of that water to go into the material in the cup. So you've got to be ready and coordinated and say, okay, 3, 2, 1, go, and pour it and start the timer kind of at the same time. You also cannot pour slowly. Basically, all of this water got to go into the tube at one time. So do it quickly, but do it carefully. Now, after you've recorded the time for the gravel, you need to go get 2 other cups. Get one that has clay in it and one that has sand in it, and get about the same amount of level of material. So about 75% full of sand and about 75% full of clay. Now, one of the people in your lab group, and you should have 3 people per group minimum. So you did the gravel part together. Now, one person is going to take the clay cup and do something different with it, and the other 2 people are going to work with the sand cup for a moment. For the clay, the problem we have with the clay is the clay ends up, after it's being stored, to be in little clumps, and we can't have clumpy clay. We need to break up the clumps. So you're going to take the cup of clay and get one of these pans like this. You're going to dump the clay into the pan. You can see it's got big chunks in it. And this doesn't work well if we have big chunks of clay, so we've got to break them up. So you're going to take a piece of wood, and there's some square ones and there's some round ones. Buy the clay, either one's fine, and you're going to mash up the clay and kind of get rid of the clumps. 2 of you can do this together. When you're done, you want the clay looking something like this, where it's a lot more fine. You've mashed out all the clumps. Now, this is a sifted sample, so you don't have to have it quite so fine, but what you don't want to have is a bunch of clumps of clay. The lab procedure will not work well. If you have any questions, bring me your sample, bring me the pan, and say, hey, is this good enough? And I'll let you know. Well, then we're going to repeat the procedure for the sand and for the clay that we did for the gravel. You're going to do these independently. You're going to do these one at a time, because remember, you got a timer going, and we got to start the timer as soon as we pour the water here into this cylinder. And we're going to stop the timer once all of the water is out of that cylinder and has gone into the clay. We're going to do the same thing here. Fill up this tube amongst the clay, and we're going to stop the timer when all of the water has gone into the clay. And we're going to write those times in the respective boxes on our data chart in our lab. When you are done, there is a tub that is labeled wet clay, and there is a tub that is labeled wet sand. You must put the wet materials back into those containers. Do not put them in with the dry clay or the dry sand where you initially got it. Now, the gravel can go back into the bucket of gravel wet. Don't pour the water in there, so kind of put your hand over the cup and kind of drain off the water in the sink first, but you can dump the wet gravel back into the gravel bucket. Okay, so what do you do now? Well, now here we are, we're at the end of the presentation. Now it's time for you to start the lab procedure. But before you do, you need to come see me, and I'm going to look over your lab notebook, make sure you have all the materials written, make sure your data table is set up correctly. I'm going to ask you a couple questions so that I am comfortable with the fact that you know what you are supposed to be doing in this lab activity. When we're done, I am going to do a little presentation on the board, and we're going to talk about the conclusions and the implications from this lab procedure. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to ask them.